Ajoke stepped off the bus, heart pounding against her ribs, each beat echoing the chaos in her mind. The city was alive with noise, vendors yelling, car horns blaring, people shouting, but to Ajoke, it all felt distant, like she was drifting through a nightmare. The air smelled different here, unfamiliar, heavy. She was far from home, far from Bonmi, far from the pain she was trying to escape. But no matter how far she ran, the weight of her secret followed her, like a shadow she couldn't shake. She paused on a narrow, dusty street, gripping her small bag, her hands trembling from fear and exhaustion. The few naira she had left were from her savings. She had taken nothing from Tony. She couldn't bear the idea of being indebted to him. Just the thought of his name made her stomach churn. His voice still lingered in her ears, the threats, the vile whispers. "You'll never escape me, Ajoke. You belong to me." But now, she was free. Or so she thought. She found a rundown guest house, barely more than a shack on the edge of town. The sign was faded, the paint peeling, but it was cheap, and that was all she needed. She paid for a week with the little she had, her hands shaking as she handed over the crumpled bills. The man behind the counter eyed her swollen belly but said nothing. No judgment. No questions. She was thankful for that. Once inside her room, she collapsed onto the bed, the thin mattress sagging under her weight. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating her. She stared at the cracked ceiling, letting the tears come, silent and hot, streaming down her face. The room was her cage, but at least it was a cage of her choosing. She touched her belly gently, whispering, "I don't know how we are going to do this, but I promise I'll protect you. I'll keep you safe." Days turned into weeks, and Ajoke tried to carve out a life for herself. She found work at a small restaurant, washing dishes and cleaning tables. The pay was meager, barely enough to cover her rent, but it was something. The physical work kept her mind occupied, even though the shame gnawed at her every day. She kept to herself, avoiding questions, keeping her head down. Her belly grew rounder, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her. A life she still didn't know how to explain. What would she tell her child? That he or she was born out of betrayal, out of violence. Ajoke couldn't bear to think about it. She shoved those thoughts deep down, burying them under the routine of her days. But the nights were unbearable. Alone in her dark room, she couldn't escape the memories. Tony's face haunted her dreams, his hands, his voice. "Tell anyone, and I'll kill you. You know I can." Every knock at the door made her jump, every shadow outside her window set her on edge. Then, one night, everything changed. It was late. The restaurant had closed hours ago, and Ajoke was trudging back to her room, exhaustion weighing her down. She was halfway down the dimly lit street when she saw it, a car parked at the corner. A black sedan. Her heart skipped a beat. She quickened her pace, eyes darting around. No, it couldn't be. She hadn't seen him in months. He couldn't have found her. But then the car door opened, and out stepped Tony. Ajoke froze, panic flooding her veins. He stood under the flickering streetlight, a cold smirk on his face, sunglasses covering his eyes despite the dark. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice low and menacing, cutting through the night air. "No," she whispered, backing away. Her legs felt like lead. Her entire body screamed to run, but she was paralyzed by fear. How had he found her? She had been so careful. "You really thought you could get away from me?" Tony stepped closer, his movement slow, deliberate. "You're carrying my child, Ajoke. You can't just disappear." Ajoke shook her head, tears welling up. "Please, Tony. I can't do this anymore." "Oh, but you will," he hissed, grabbing her wrist. His grip was iron, bruising her skin instantly. "You will, or I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me." Suddenly, headlights flashed behind them, and a car pulled up. Ajoke's heart raced. Had someone seen? Could someone help? The door opened, and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. He looked younger than Tony, but there was something about him, something solid, unshakable. His eyes flicked between Ajoke and Tony, narrowing as he took in the situation. "Is there a problem here?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm. Tony turned, annoyance flashing across his face. "This isn't your business, friend." The man didn't back down. "It's as if she doesn't want you touching her." Tony's grip tightened on Ajoke's wrist, and she winced in pain. But she didn't speak. She couldn't. Fear had stolen her voice. "I suggest you walk away," Tony growled, his eyes darkening. The man stepped closer, his stance unwavering. "I suggest you let her go." There was a moment of tense silence, and for a second, Ajoke thought Tony would lash out. But then, with a sneer, he shoved her hand away. "This isn't over, Ajoke," Tony spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this." He climbed back into his car, the tires screeching as he sped off into the night. Ajoke stood frozen, her entire body trembling. The man watched the car disappear before turning to her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now, concerned. Ajoke nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was. Her legs felt weak, her head spinning. I don't know." He gave her a kind smile. "I'm Yemi. I live just down the road. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Ajoke hesitated, but something about Yemi's calm presence made her feel a tiny spark of safety. It was the first time in a long time that she hadn't felt utterly alone. "Ajoke," she whispered, her voice barely audible. For the first time in months, the world didn't seem so dark. In the days that followed, Ajoke found herself looking forward to Yemi's visits. He would walk her home after work, making casual conversation. He didn't ask too many questions, never prying into her past, and she was grateful for that. He was a distraction from the constant fear that Tony would come back. But even as she started to feel a flicker of hope, the weight of her secret grew heavier. One night, as they walked together under the dim streetlights, Yemi stopped and looked at her, concern etched on his face. "You seem like you're carrying a lot," he said gently. "You don't have to tell me, but if you ever want to talk, I'm here." Ajoke looked away, her heart tightening. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to spill everything, the abuse, the fear, the baby growing inside her. But how could she? How could she burden him with her darkness? "I appreciate it, Yemi," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But I'm not ready." He nodded, his understanding making her want to cry. "Whenever you are." But deep down, Ajoke knew she couldn't keep the secret forever. Tony's threats hung over her like a storm cloud, and she knew, sooner or later, he would come back. And when he did, she wouldn't be able to protect herself or her unborn child.